Welcome to the law offices of Chris M. Ingram's Immigration News Show. Today we ask, if you're building the future of American AI, why are you still leaving your own future to a random lottery? We'd like to thank attorney Chris M. Ingram and staff at the law offices of Chris M. Ingram for their hard work in preparing the research for this show, which draws on a wide variety of news sources from both sides of the aisle, providing a balanced view. Attorney Ingram is also a vocal advocate for the rights and protection of immigration applicants, although our coverage is designed to be nonpartisan. Please don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe to our channel. We are also on Spotify, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, X, Reddit, and Instagram, where we're growing rapidly thanks to our social media team. You can also visit our website on www.breakthroughUSA.com. We'd love to see you there. Disclaimer. Please note that this presentation should not be intended as legal advice for your specific situation. If you, a friend, or a family member would like a free consultation, you can visit our website at www.breakthroughUSA.com and schedule an appointment. We'd love to hear from you and help you if we can. We'd also like to point out that this presentation was created using AI hosts. Okay, let's dive in.
Yeah, let's get right into it because this is such a critical topic right now.
It really is. So just to give everyone listening a quick overview of our mission today, we are doing a deep dive into some truly fascinating legal research prepared by attorney Chris Ingram and his team.
Right.
And we're focusing on this wild intersection in America right now. We have these unbelievable breakthroughs in AI medical imaging.
Oh, yeah, the tech is just mind-blowing.
Right, and it's being driven by this incredible immigrant talent. But then there's this little-known, highly strategic legal pathway to actually keep these innovators in the country when the standard visa systems just completely fail them.
Which they do constantly. I mean, the current system is practically set up to fail them.
Exactly. So I want to start by just having you imagine something. Like you are a systems engineer.
Yeah.
You've spent, say, the last 4 years of your life designing this artificial intelligence architecture. And this AI, it can spot stage 1 lung cancer on a scan years before a human doctor ever could.
Literally saving lives.
Actively saving lives. Your code is in hospitals right this very second. But then tomorrow morning, you could be forced to pack up your entire life and get deported.
Yeah.
Simply because a literal bingo ball inside some government computer system didn't have your registration number on it. I mean, reading the research from our attorneys, that is the actual terrifying reality happening right now in American research labs.
It is, and it's a massive structural failure. And honestly, it's happening at the absolute worst possible moment in the history of medical technology.
Because of the boom in AI.
Right, because we are currently sitting at the epicenter of a total revolution in medical diagnostics. And this revolution is driven almost entirely by international talent.
Yeah.
But our regulatory framework for keeping that talent in the United States is, well, it's essentially a casino game.
A casino game, exactly. So let's dig into this legal research provided by attorney Chris Ingram and his team, because this whole intersection of high-stakes AI and immigration law is just completely wild.
It really is. But before we even touch the legal strategy, I think we really need to understand the medical reality first.
For sure. Because when I was looking through the notes from our legal team, the sheer volume of what happens in a hospital every day just blew my mind.
Oh, the numbers are staggering.
Right. We are talking about millions upon millions of medical scans taken yearly in the U.S. alone.
Yeah. CT scans, MRIs, thousands of pathology slides, X-rays.
And for the entire history of modern medicine, up until about, 5 minutes ago, a human being had to physically sit in a chair and look at every single one of those images.
Which is just exhausting to even think about. I mean, to understand the problem that AI is solving here, you really have to understand the cognitive load on a human radiologist.
Right. Break that down for us.
So a modern CT scan isn't just one flat picture anymore. It can be a series of hundreds of slices, right, going through a patient's body.
Yeah, hundreds.
Yeah, and a radiologist sits in this darkened room, usually for like a 12-hour shift, just staring at these high-resolution monitors.
That sounds brutal on the eyes alone.
It is, and they are looking for like a slight variation in grayscale, a shadow that might be just 3 pixels wide.
3 pixels.
Yeah, hidden among all these complex tissues, bone structures, blood vessels, and they have to do this over and over hundreds of times a day.
Knowing that if they mess up, the consequences are fatal.
Exactly. Knowing that if their focus slips for even a fraction of a second, someone might die.
The margin for error is effectively zero.
Zero.
I mean, you miss a tiny faint shadow on a scan at, say, 4:00 p.m. at the end of a really long shift, and that highly treatable early-stage anomaly just silently advances.
Yep.
And then 6 months later, it's stage 4, and a family's life is destroyed.
Or, a subtle cardiac abnormality goes completely undetected.
Right, and the patient thinks they are totally fine right up until they're in the back of an ambulance. The pressure on these doctors to never blink, to never have a moment of retina fatigue, it's literally superhuman.
Which is exactly why human beings just cannot scale to meet this demand alone anymore.
Right. We've hit the biological limit.
We have. The integration of artificial intelligence into this space is just a fundamental necessity now. But what the research from attorney Chris Ingram highlights so effectively is the shift we're seeing right now toward multimodal AI models.
Multimodal?
Yeah, multimodal. This is where the entire landscape changes.
Okay, let's define that for the listener, because I know early AI in medicine was mostly single modality.
Right.
Like it would look at an X-ray and just analyze that specific image, right? Just the pixels.
Correct. So a single modality system takes an image, let's say a chest X-ray, and it runs it through a neural network that's trained only on other chest X-rays.
Okay.
It just looks for patterns. But medicine doesn't happen in a vacuum, A shatter on a lung might mean one thing for a 20-year-old non-smoker with no family history.
Right.
And something entirely different for a 65-year-old with a history of occupational hazard exposure and, a recent drop in their white blood cell count.
That makes total sense.
So multimodal AI is designed to process the imaging data simultaneously with everything else.
Wait, everything else?
Yeah, the patient's clinical notes, their unstructured historical lab results, their genetic markers, the entire longitudinal patient history all at once.
Okay, I was trying to wrap my head around this concept while reviewing the legal research earlier, and I thought of an analogy.
Oh, let's hear it.
So, single modality AI, just looking at the X-ray on its own, feels like trying to guess the entire plot of a complex thriller movie by only looking through a tiny keyhole at one specific scene.
Okay, I like that.
Right, like you see a character holding a wrench, but you have no idea if they're just fixing a sink or if they're about to commit a murder.
Right, context is missing.
Exactly. But multimodal AI is like having the ability to read the entire script, watch the film from multiple camera angles, read the prequel novel, and have a live conversation with the director all at the exact same time.
It's a really solid analogy, but honestly, let's push it even further.
Okay, push it.
The single modality AI looking through the keyhole, it doesn't even know what genre of movie it's watching.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It just sees the wrench. The multimodal system understands context at a fundamental level. I mean, human doctors naturally try to be multimodal. A good physician will cross-reference the scan with the patient file.
Right, they look at your chart.
Exactly. But human working memory is severely limited. A human brain can only synthesize so many disparate data points. A lab value from 2019, a clinical note from 2021, a genetic marker from yesterday before cognitive fatigue sets in.
Yeah, you just can't hold it all in your head.
A multimodal AI model doesn't suffer from cognitive fatigue. It can cross-reference the microscopic cellular data on a pathology slide with a subtle, 2% fluctuation in a blood test from 3 years ago. Instantaneously.
That is just incredible. And the results are undeniable, too. The legal research points to this 2026 Frontiers in Medicine review that confirms this.
Oh, absolutely.
These multimodal systems are just consistently outperforming single-modality models across all major clinical diagnostic tasks. Vastly improved cancer detection rates, incredibly precise cardiac assessments, and pathology classification that is spotting things humans literally cannot see.
Because the AI is finding correlations that human biology just didn't evolve to recognize.
Right.
And the regulatory bodies have totally capitulated to this reality now. According to the data compiled by our researchers, by late 2025, the FDA had approved over 880 AI and machine learning medical devices.
Wait, 880? That feels like a massive number for a regulatory body as famously cautious as the FDA.
It is massive. And it's not a linear progression either. It's an accelerating curve.
Like a hockey stick graph.
Exactly. Every single year since 2020 has seen a steeper climb in approvals. And to get an AI device cleared by the FDA, usually through the 510(k) pathway or de novo classification, you have to prove clinical efficacy and safety with exhaustive data.
So they aren't just rubber stamping these things.
Not at all. The fact that almost 1,000 of these systems have cleared that extraordinarily high bar tells us that the medical and regulatory establishment has fully accepted this as the new baseline standard of care.
The attorney's notes actually use a really specific phrase here. They call this shift structural, not incremental.
Yes.
Break that down for us. What does a structural shift actually look like in a hospital setting?
Well, an incremental change in healthcare is, a slightly sharper MRI machine.
Right. Better resolution.
Or it's a new software interface that saves a doctor 5 minutes of typing clinical notes. It just improves the existing paradigm.
Okay.
A structural change means the very architecture of how we detect and treat disease is fundamentally destroyed and rebuilt.
Wow.
It means that within the next decade, a diagnosis won't even be considered complete legally or ethically unless it has been synthesized by a multimodal AI.
That is huge.
Think about the introduction of antibiotics or the discovery of the X-ray itself.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
Before the X-ray, doctors had to guess what a broken bone looked like just by feeling the skin.
Right, which sounds barbaric now.
After the X-ray, guessing became malpractice. AI is having that exact structural impact on diagnostics right now.
Which brings us to the human element. Because this structural, life-altering technology isn't just magic. It didn't drop out of the sky.
No, it didn't.
It is the result of millions of hours of painstaking, frustrating work by brilliant people. Yeah. And if we want to understand the modern boom in AI medical diagnostics, we have to look at the foundation of computer vision itself.
Absolutely.
What I found so striking in the legal research is that this entire technological revolution was essentially pioneered by an immigrant.
Yes, the story of Fei Li.
Yeah.
Her narrative is the literal blueprint for why the United States must retain international talent and, frankly, why our current systems are so tragically flawed.
Let's walk through her background a bit because it's amazing. Born in Chengdu, China in 1976. She moved to Parsippany, New Jersey as a teenager.
Right.
And this wasn't a story of immediate pampered academic luxury either.
Not at all.
While she was in high school, her parents were running a dry cleaning business. She was literally working the counter, doing the books, dealing with customers, all while trying to master English and navigate a completely foreign educational system.
And, managing a small business as a teenager in a new country builds a very specific type of resilience.
Oh, I bet.
You learn to manage chaotic systems, resource constraints, complex human variables, and that raw work ethic clearly translated into extraordinary academic achievement. I mean, she earned a full scholarship to Princeton, followed by a PhD from Caltech.
Unbelievable. But the pivotal moment in our deep dive today isn't just her degree. It was her contrarian vision.
Yes, the contrarian focus.
The legal research points out that during a period when the vast majority of the artificial intelligence community was focused elsewhere, she became obsessed with the problem almost nobody else thought was central to AI.
Right.
She wanted to teach computers how to see. Now wait, why was that contrarian? To a layperson like me, teaching a computer to see a picture of a cat and recognize it as a cat seems like the very first step in making a smart machine. Why did the AI community ignore this?
To understand why it was contrarian, you really have to understand the mechanics of early AI.
Okay, lay it on me.
For decades, computer vision was notoriously, punishingly difficult. Humans take vision for granted because a massive portion of our biological brain is entirely dedicated to processing light, shape, and context instantaneously.
Right, we just open our eyes and see.
Exactly, but to a computer, an image isn't a picture. It is a massive, dumb matrix of numbers representing red, green, and blue pixel values.
So a picture of a cat is just a giant spreadsheet of numbers to a computer.
Exactly. And the AI community had largely hit a wall trying to write explicit, logic-based rules for recognizing objects.
Like what?
Well, imagine trying to write code that defines a chair. You write a rule. A chair has 4 legs and a flat surface.
Okay, simple enough.
Then you feed it a picture of a bar stool, and the computer fails because a bar stool has one central pillar.
Oh, right.
You write a rule for a cat. Pointy ears and whiskers. Then the computer gets confused by a picture of a dog, or a cat in the shadows, or a cat facing away from the camera.
Because the real world is messy.
The real world has infinite edge cases. So it was considered an intractable problem, just too messy for the algorithms of the time.
But she didn't think the algorithms were the primary bottleneck. She thought the data was the problem.
Yes. She realized that human children don't learn to see by being handed a textbook of geometric rules.
No, they just look around.
They learn to see by experiencing millions of visual examples over their early years. They point at a dog, the parent says dog. They point at a horse, the parent says no, horse.
Right.
Their biological neural network adjusts its internal weights based on that massive data set. So while she was at Stanford, she spearheaded the creation of ImageNet.
ImageNet.
Yeah.
The research from Chris Ingram's team highlights this as the ultimate turning point in modern tech history.
It absolutely was.
A database of more than 14 million labeled images. How do you even build that?
Through sheer, grueling logistical willpower, they used Amazon Mechanical Turk, essentially crowdsourcing the labeling of millions of images to thousands of workers globally.
That sounds like a nightmare to organize.
It was a massive undertaking to map the visual world into an ontology, a categorized structure that a machine could actually digest. And then, in 2010, they launched the ImageNet Large-Scale Visual Recognition Challenge.
What was that?
They basically threw down the gauntlet to the global computer science community. They said, here's the data, now build the algorithms that can actually learn from it.
And this triggered the deep learning revolution.
It did. By 2012, a team led by Geoffrey Hinton entered the competition using a specific type of algorithm called the convolutional neural network, or CNN.
Right.
CNNs had been around theoretically for a while, but they were completely starved for data. When Hinton's team unleashed a CNN on Fei-Fei Lai's massive ImageNet dataset, the error rates in computer vision plummeted by an unheard-of margin.
Wow.
It was a watershed moment.
So if I'm tracking this correctly, the ability for a machine to digest millions of pixels, recognize patterns that aren't explicitly coded by a human programmer, and synthesize that visual data into a conclusion, that underlying mechanism was unlocked by ImageNet.
Yes.
And that exact same mechanism is what allows a modern AI to look at a pixel matrix of a lung MRI and say, that is a tumor.
Precisely. The foundational architecture of every single image recognition system we use today, from the vision stack in a Tesla to the facial recognition unlocking your phone, and crucially, every multimodal medical imaging AI saving lives in hospitals today, it all traces its lineage directly back to Fei-Fei Lai's contrarian vision and the creation of ImageNet.
I engaged the law offices of Chris M. Ingram for my EB-1A visa application. The firm's systematic and thorough approach to gathering evidence, developing case arguments, and client communication is highly impressive. My experience with them has been outstanding and has exceeded all my expectations. I am deeply thankful to Ria, Judith, and all the staff members who worked directly and indirectly on my case. The entire team at the law offices of Chris M. Ingram is professional, well-informed, and exceptionally supportive. I highly recommend Chris Ingram's firm for their expertise, responsiveness, and unwavering dedication to clients, which greatly eased my anxiety and ensured our green card success.
That is just wild to think about.
Without the dataset she championed, the trajectory of computer vision is delayed by perhaps a decade.
And she went on to become Google Cloud's chief AI scientist and co-founded Stanford's Human-Centered AI Institute.
A true visionary.
But there is a specific quote from her in the legal research that feels incredibly relevant to our discussion on immigration today. She said, diversity of thinking and diversity of life experiences are necessary ingredients for building AI that works for everyone.
That is not just a feel-good corporate platitude either. It is a hard technical reality in machine learning.
Oh, so?
Because an AI system will ruthlessly optimize for whatever metrics it is given based solely on the data it is fed. It has absolutely no common sense.
Right.
If the people building the system, curating the data, and defining the success metrics all share the exact same background, the exact same socioeconomic status, and the exact same life experiences, they will inevitably have massive blind spots.
Give me an example of how that failure looks in the real world of medical AI.
Okay, consider an AI trained to detect melanoma, a type of skin cancer.
Sure.
If the engineering team and the clinical partners exclusively source their training images from hospitals in affluent, predominantly white neighborhoods, the AI will become incredibly proficient at identifying melanomas on light skin.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah. When deployed in the real world, it might completely fail to recognize how that exact same cancer presents on darker skin tones, leading to delayed diagnoses and deaths in minority populations.
Because it hasn't seen it before.
Exactly. The AI isn't malicious. It simply doesn't know what it hasn't seen.
So diversity of life experience, like the experience of immigrating to a new country, navigating a new culture, or, running a dry cleaning counter in New Jersey, it forces a kind of expansive thinking.
Yes.
It forces you to question assumptions about the data you are feeding the machine.
Exactly. It ensures that the teams building these world-altering systems are thinking about edge cases and broader human impacts rather than merely optimizing a cold mathematical equation on a clean but totally unrepresentative data set.
Okay, so if the foundation of this life-saving tech was built by an immigrant who started behind a dry cleaning counter, how is the current U.S. immigration system treating the brilliant minds trying to follow in her footsteps today?
It's treating them terribly.
Right, because the conflict highlighted in the research from our legal team is that we are currently threatening to expel the modern-day Fei-Fei-Lees.
Yep.
Not because they aren't smart enough, but because of a random game of chance.
To really understand the human cost of this structural flaw, we need to look at the reality of the H-1B visa system.
Right.
The attorney's notes provide a composite profile of a case that is tragically common. Let's look at the story of Min-Jun Oh.
Right, Min-Jun Oh. According to the research, Min-Jun is a systems engineer in his early 30s from South Korea. And he didn't just casually stroll into the tech world. He is a PhD from KAIST, the Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology.
Yes.
For those listening who aren't in the loop, what does a PhD from KAIST actually represent?
KAIST is essentially the MIT of South Korea.
Okay, wow.
It is a wildly prestigious, rigorously demanding institution. Earning a PhD there means you have survived one of the most competitive academic environments on the planet. And Min-Jun's output was exceptional. He produced 3 peer-reviewed publications in highly respected medical AI journals.
And the attorney's notes point out that 2 of those papers were cited within 12 months by independent research groups at major U.S. university hospitals.
Which is the critical metric.
Why are citations so critical?
A publication is just words on a page until it is cited. A citation means that other scientists looked at Min-Jun's methodology, found it completely valid, and actually used his findings as a foundational building block for their own ongoing research.
I see.
It proves his work has real utility in the real world.
So Min-Jun comes to the United States. He joins a medical AI startup in Boston on an H-1B visa.
Right.
And he's working on exactly what we discussed earlier, building multimodal diagnostic systems for radiology and oncology.
Willing the future.
Exactly. He is designing the deep learning architecture that integrates complex MRI imaging data with unstructured clinical records to give radiologists that computational support. He's a lead author. He's being cited globally. He is presenting his findings at major international conferences like MBICAI, and he's even serving as a peer reviewer for a leading journal.
And let me just say, serving as a peer reviewer is a massive validator.
Is it?
Oh, yeah. It means the editors of top-tier scientific journals consider him such an authority that they trust him to evaluate the validity and methodology of other PhD-level scientists before their work is allowed to be published.
Okay, so you have this guy who is actively building tools to cure cancer. His employer, a U.S. company, desperately needs him. The global scientific community respects him.
Completely respects him.
He is fully integrated into the American innovation engine. And then the 2026 H-1B weighted lottery cycle hits.
Yeah, the lottery.
Explain to me the mechanics of how this lottery actually works, because reading this, it feels insane.
It is insane. The H-1B visa is the primary route for highly skilled temporary workers, engineers, doctors, IT professionals to work in the U.S.
Right.
But the system operates under a strict annual cap that was established by Congress decades ago, long before the modern tech boom.
Okay.
The cap is set at 65,000 visas for regular applicants, with an additional 20,000 exemption for those holding a U.S. master's degree or higher.
So 85,000 total slots. How many people usually apply for those slots?
In recent years, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, or USCIS, has regularly received upwards of 400,000 to 500,000 registrations for those 85,000 slots.
Wow. Over 500,000 people for 85,000 spots.
Because the demand vastly exceeds the statutory supply, the government uses a computerized random lottery system to select which petitions will even be allowed to be filed and reviewed.
Let me throw an analogy out here because I was thinking about this.
Go for it.
Imagine a prestigious hospital has a patient with a rare, highly complex cardiac disease. They scour the globe. They find the exact surgeon who has the specific skills to perform the life-saving operation. The hospital desperately wants this surgeon.
Right.
The surgeon is standing right outside the door, scrubbed in, holding the scalpel, ready to go. But before they let him into the operating room, the hospital administration makes him walk over to a roulette wheel and put all his chips on black.
Yeah.
If it lands on red, they tell him, sorry, you can't come in, and the patient just dies. That is what this system feels like.
Your analogy is bleak, but it doesn't even capture the full absurdity of it.
Really?
It's like playing roulette, but the casino can just arbitrarily change the rules mid-spin, and you are competing against thousands of other people who bought $100 lottery tickets while you brought $1 million surgical suite.
That is maddening.
It is vital for listeners to understand the absolute disconnect between a candidate's merit and the mathematical reality of the H-1B lottery.
Wait, so the lottery system literally doesn't care what you do, like at all?
It is entirely blind to merit. The algorithm does not know and legally does not care if you are building an AI to detect pediatric brain tumors or if you are writing a script to optimize click-through rates on an ad for cheap sunglasses.
That is so depressing.
A company's willingness to pay you a massive salary, their desperate need for your highly specialized expertise, and your unparalleled value to the national interest provide absolutely zero insulation against the random mathematical odds of the draw.
So despite his critical life-saving work, Min Jun's registration wasn't selected purely due to random chance.
Yep.
He is suddenly facing the prospect of having to pack up his life, pull his kids out of school, uproot his family, and leave the country, taking all of that critical knowledge, all that momentum, and all those unwritten algorithms with him.
This is the exact moment of crisis where foreign nationals and their employers usually panic.
I would panic.
The feeling of systemic powerlessness is immense. You have done everything right, you've achieved at the highest global levels of your field, and a random number generator is dictating that your American life is over.
Right.
But this is exactly where the strategic pivot becomes necessary.
And this is where the deep dive gets really interesting, because the research from attorney Chris Ingram lays out an underutilized pathway that completely bypasses this lottery madness.
Yes.
We're talking about the O-1A visa.
The O-1A is a transformative, incredibly powerful legal tool, but it is deeply misunderstood by the very STEM professionals it was explicitly designed to help.
Let's get into it.
It is a non-immigrant visa designated for individuals with extraordinary ability in the sciences, education, business, or athletics.
Let's break down the tangible advantages of this visa over the H-1B, because reading the research, they are massive. First and foremost, there is no annual cap, right?
Correct. Because there is no statutory cap set by Congress, there is no lottery.
Thank goodness.
If a legal team submits a petition that meets the evidentiary standards and the adjudicating officer approves it on its merits, the visa is issued. Full stop. You are not competing against a quota of 85,000.
That takes so much anxiety out of the equation.
Furthermore, there is no rigid specialty occupation requirement in the convoluted, highly scrutinized way the H-1B demands.
And the statistics provided in the legal research are stunning. Looking at the fiscal year 2025 data from USCIS, the O-1A had a 93.9% approval rate.
Yeah.
Nearly 94%. And the attorney's notes point out this is especially wild when you contrast it with other high-level categories. The EB-1A dropped to a 66.6% approval rate in the third quarter of FY25, and the EB-2 national interest waiver dropped down to 54%. Why is the O-1A so much more consistently approved?
The high approval rate reflects self-selection and rigorous legal vetting.
What do you mean by self-selection?
Well, because the standard is high, weak cases generally aren't filed. But more importantly, it highlights that when a highly skilled legal team deeply understands the specific regulatory criteria and meticulously curates the documentary evidence to match those criteria, the category is highly reliable.
It's an objective test, not a lottery.
Exactly. It is an objective evaluation of evidence, not a coin flip.
It's also fast. The research notes that premium processing is available, which legally guarantees a decision from the government within 15 business days.
Which is life-changing.
15 days. When your entire life is hanging in the balance, the difference between waiting 8 months in limbo and getting a guaranteed response in 3 weeks is astronomical.
Oh, yeah.
And you get up to 3 years initially with unlimited one-year extensions as long as you continue working in your area of expertise.
But this brings us to the core of the strategy. The criteria.
Right. How does this actually work?
How does a working professional actually prove extraordinary ability to a skeptical immigration officer?
Good question.
The regulations state that an applicant must demonstrate extraordinary ability by showing receipt of a major internationally recognized award or by meeting at least 3 of 8 specific regulatory criteria.
Wait, hold on. This is where I have to stop you.
Okay.
You're saying extraordinary ability and internationally recognized award. The word extraordinary literally implies 1 in a million.
Sure, it does sound like that.
When I hear that, my brain immediately goes to the Nobel Prize or an Olympic gold medal. I am a highly skilled systems engineer. I work really hard. My code works, but I don't have a Nobel Prize on my mantle. How does a normal working professional pass a legal test with that name?
That reaction is universal, and it is exactly what attorney Chris Ingram refers to as the Nobel Prize myth.
The Nobel Prize. I love that phrase.
It is the single biggest psychological barrier preventing brilliant foreign nationals from utilizing this visa. Yes, a Nobel Prize will absolutely get you an O-1A.
I would hope so.
But the law was intentionally written to accommodate the top tier of working professionals who do not have that level of ubiquitous household fame. If you do not have a Nobel Prize, the regulations provide an alternative path.
Yeah.
You must meet at least 3 of 8 alternative criteria.
Okay, let's demystify these 8 criteria because this is where the rubber meets the road. I want to go through every single one of them and look at what they actually mean in the real world of STEM and AI research.
Let's do it.
Looking at the attorney's notes, the first criterion is receipt of nationally or internationally recognized prizes or awards for excellence in the field. So what counts? An Employee of the Month plaque.
No, an Employee of the Month plaque will be immediately dismissed.
Figured as much.
But it also doesn't have to be the Nobel. The adjudicators are looking for industry-specific awards where the selection process is highly competitive and based strictly on merit.
Give me some examples.
For example, an early career investigator award from a major medical society like the American College of Radiology, or winning a highly competitive national hackathon sponsored by a major tech conglomerate where thousands of engineers competed, or receiving a significant government research grant where the peer review selection process was incredibly rigorous.
Okay, that makes sense. Criterion 2. Membership in associations in the field which require outstanding achievement of their members. So I can't just pay a $150 annual fee, subscribe to a magazine, and join the IE as a standard member, right?
Exactly. The key phrase in the regulation is require outstanding achievement.
A standard membership where you just pay dues and hold a bachelor's degree carries 0 weight. USCIS wants to see memberships where you have to be nominated by your peers.
Where they actually vet you.
Right, where a panel of recognized national or international experts reviews your life's work, and where admission is considered a hallmark of reaching the pinnacle of your subfield. Being elevated to the status of a fellow within the IE or being elected to the National Academy of Engineering would perfectly satisfy this.
Awesome. Criterion 3. Publish material in professional or major trade publications or other major media about you and your work. So this isn't you writing an article. This is someone else writing about you.
Correct. And the focus must be on you and your work, not just your employer.
That's an important distinction.
It is. If a major tech blog like TechCrunch or a respected medical trade journal publishes a feature article detailing the specific multimodal AI diagnostic system you designed and explicitly names you as the lead architect driving the innovation, that constitutes published material about your work. So a generic PR newswire press release announcing that your company raised capital will not suffice.
No, it will not. It has to be about you.
Got it. Number 4, participation, either individually or on a panel, as a judge of the work of others in your field. This feels very specific.
In the academic and scientific realm, this is actually incredibly common, yet highly educated researchers often overlook it.
Really? How so?
Well, if you are a PhD researcher and you are formally invited by the editor-in-chief of a prestigious medical AI journal to review the manuscript of another scientist before it is published, to judge its methodology, its data integrity, and determine if it is worthy of publication, you are acting as a judge of the work of others.
Oh, wow. I wouldn't have even thought of that.
Serving on a grant review committee for the National Science Foundation, or serving on the technical program committee for a major conference like MICAI, also fulfills this criterion beautifully.
That's super accessible for academics. Okay, number 5. Original scientific, scholarly, or business-related contributions of major significance in the field. This feels incredibly broad. How do you legally prove major significance?
It is the most broadly defined criterion, and therefore it is usually the most heavily debated point in these petitions. Proving original contribution isn't just showing you did good work or wrote clean code. You have to prove your work structurally changed the landscape.
And how do you do that?
The most objective way is through citations. If you invent a novel algorithm for processing cardiac MRIs, publish it. And within 2 years, 20 different independent research hospitals are using your exact algorithm in their own clinical studies and citing your paper, you have demonstrably made an original contribution of major significance.
Are citations the only way? What if you were in private industry and you patent something instead of publishing it?
Patents are excellent evidence, provided you can prove the patent is actually being utilized or licensed, not just sitting in a filing cabinet somewhere. Furthermore, this is where expert letters become paramount. A skilled legal team will secure independent letters from luminaries in the field, people who have never worked with you directly, who can explicitly testify to USCIS exactly why your specific algorithm or engineering architecture solved a problem that had previously baffled the industry.
Okay, number 6.
I was more than happy and satisfied with the services. The team was very prompt and immediate with their responses and guidance. I had seldom experienced such professional and efficient services provided. I would like to especially call out Hannah Nixon, who has been a wonderful partner to work with, and she has been so quick on our requirements that we at times had a hard time catching up with how quick she was working the stages.
Authorship of scholarly articles in professional journals or other major media. This is the bread and butter of academia.
Yes. If you are a PhD researcher, you likely have publications.
Yep.
But the legal strategy isn't just to drop a stack of papers on an adjudicator's desk. No, the attorneys must contextualize the evidence. They show the impact factor of the journals you published in, proving that you are contributing to the highest level discourse in your discipline. They will calculate your H-index or I-10 index to show a sustained pattern of scholarly influence.
You really have to paint a full picture.
Right.
Number 7. Employment in a critical or essential capacity for organizations and establishments that have a distinguished reputation.
This criterion is where private industry professionals like startup engineers really shine.
Okay, give me a scenario.
Let's say you work for a highly distinguished medical AI startup that recently received Tier 1 venture capital funding and FDA de novo clearance. If you are the lead machine learning engineer designing the core architecture of their flagship diagnostic tool, you are in a critical capacity.
Without you, it falls apart.
Exactly. Without your specific expertise, the product fails. The organization's overarching success is directly tethered to your daily output.
And finally, number 8. Evidence that you have commanded or will command a high salary or other significantly high remuneration for services.
This is a purely objective, data-driven criterion.
So it's just about the numbers.
Right. A legal team will use specialized wage surveys, labor data from the Department of Labor, or independent compensation analyses to prove that your base salary, coupled with your equity or stock options, puts you in the top tier, usually the 90th percentile or above, of systems engineers or AI researchers in your specific geographic location.
Okay, when we break it down like that, going through all 8, the Nobel Prize myth completely shatters.
Doesn't it?
It does. Most highly accomplished STEM professionals hear the word extraordinary, and they preemptively self-reject. They count themselves out before the game even begins. But when you look at peer reviews, citations, critical roles in successful startups, and high salaries, the evidence actually exists.
It does.
The raw materials are sitting right there in their laptops.
The raw materials are absolutely there for thousands of foreign nationals currently stressing over the H-1B lottery. But the vital distinction is that possessing the raw materials is not the same thing as having an approved petition.
Right. You have to build the case.
Exactly. The evidence exists, but it is the strategic presentation by a skilled legal team that dictates the outcome. It is about taking those discrete data points and weaving them into a cohesive, unassailable narrative that leaves an immigration officer with absolutely no doubt that you have risen to the very top echelon of your field.
Which brings us perfectly back to Min Jun's story. When the H-1B lottery failed him, how did these criteria apply to his reality? How did the attorneys actually map his life against these 8 points?
Looking at the legal research from our team, they didn't just throw everything at the wall and hope something stuck.
No, they were strategic.
Very. They built a meticulously targeted petition around 6 of those 8 criteria. Remember, the law only requires you to meet 3.
Oh, right. 3 out of 8.
By presenting 6 incredibly strong criteria, they created an overwhelming preponderance of evidence.
Let's look at the specific strategy. First, the published scholarly work. They documented his 3 publications in peer-reviewed medical AI journals, focusing on the high impact factors of those specific publications.
Exactly.
Second, his peer reviewer credentials. They didn't just casually mention he was a reviewer. They provided the documented formal invitations and acknowledgments from the journal editors, proving he judged the work of others.
Third, they utilized his conference presentations. He had presented his research at MyCAI, the Medical Image Computing and Computer-Assisted Intervention Society, and the IEEMBC.
Those are major deals.
These are not local weekend meetups. They are internationally recognized, highly exclusive gatherings in the biomedical engineering field. Having your work selected for presentation, there is a massive validator of your standing.
Fourth, and this feels like the linchpin, they secured expert letters. But not from his boss or his college professor. They got a letter from a physician scientist at a Harvard-affiliated hospital.
A completely independent expert.
Right. This was an independent expert who had actually cited Minjun's published protocols in their own clinical research.
That is the gold standard for proving an original contribution of major significance. When an independent expert from a world-renowned institution writes a letter explicitly stating, "I do not know Minjun personally, but his algorithm is vital to our ongoing research at Harvard," the adjudicator has very little room to deny the significance of the work.
That is powerful. Fifth, they conducted a detailed salary analysis confirming his compensation placed him in the top tier of similarly situated AI researchers in the highly competitive Boston tech market.
Yep.
And sixth, they provided extensive documentation organizational charts, letters from the CEO, product development roadmaps, proving his critical role at his startup, showing that his work was the absolute core of the company's clinical AI pipeline.
And because they utilized premium processing, the approval came through in 14 business days.
Let's just pause and think about the human impact of that timeline. A few weeks prior, Minjun was facing the terrifying prospect of uprooting his entire life. The startup was facing the loss of its lead architect, potentially delaying FDA trials.
The stress must have been unbelievable.
And 14 days later, the crisis is completely averted. There is no work interruption. His employer keeps their top engineer. And crucially, his family, his wife, and 2 kids who are on dependent O3 status, their lives remain stable. The kids didn't have to be pulled out of their American schools. The psychological relief of that email arriving must have been staggering.
The immediate relief is profound. But as the legal research emphasizes, using the O-1A merely as an emergency parachute is short-sighted.
Wait, really?
Yeah. This is where the strategy becomes truly visionary. The O-1A is a bridge, not a final destination.
A bridge to where?
A bridge to permanent residence. The O-1A is a non-immigrant visa. It is technically temporary, even though it can be extended indefinitely in 1-year increments.
Okay, so you want to eventually get off it.
Yes. But it buys the individual the single most precious commodity in the U.S. immigration system, time. It buys time, stability, and work authorization to build a bulletproof EB-1A extraordinary ability green card petition.
Let me throw another analogy at you to see if I'm tracking this long-term strategy.
Let's hear it.
It feels like the O-1A is a protective greenhouse.
Yeah.
If you stay in the H-1B system, you are out in the wild, subject to the harsh, unpredictable weather of lottery systems, arbitrary caps, and sudden policy shifts. One bad storm, and your career is uprooted.
Absolutely.
But the O-1A takes you out of that hostile environment. It puts you in a stable, climate-controlled greenhouse. It gives your career the safe, uninterrupted environment it needs to grow deep roots and develop into a massive, permanent EB-1A tree.
That is an excellent analogy, and I would add that the H-1B is like trying to grow that tree on the median of a busy highway.
Right.
You might survive, but you're constantly at risk of being run over. The O-1A greenhouse fosters compounding value.
Right.
Every single year that Minjun spends safely working in the United States on his O-1A is another year he is accumulating more citations on his papers.
Because he's still publishing, still working.
It is another year of being invited to review more prestigious journal articles. It is another year of spearheading critical AI projects and gathering independent expert letters. He is actively enriching the very evidentiary soil he needs for his permanent residence application.
And we absolutely must put this into the broader context of the massive backlogs in the immigration system, because that is where this strategy goes from smart to absolutely essential, particularly for researchers from specific countries.
This is a vital point highlighted extensively in the research from our team. If you look at the standard employment-based green card categories, specifically the EB-2 advanced degree and EB-3 skilled worker categories, the system is heavily constrained by per-country limits.
Explain how that works.
Under U.S. law, no single country of birth can receive more than 7% of the total green cards issued in a given year in those categories.
So a country with 1.4 billion people gets the exact same number of green cards as a country with 5 million people.
Exactly. Because the demand for tech and medical professionals from countries like India and China vastly, exponentially exceeds this arbitrary 7% cap, massive backlogs are formed.
And when we say backlogs, we aren't talking about waiting a few extra months for paperwork to process. The legal research notes that Indian nationals applying in the EB2 or EB3 categories today are facing multi-decade wait lists based on the visa bulletin.
Yes, multi-decade.
Multi-decade.
Yeah.
You could apply today, have an approved I-140 petition, and theoretically wait 20 or 30 years for your priority date to become current so you can actually get the green card.
It's unbelievable. It is an excruciating, paralyzing state of limbo, where you can't easily change jobs or be promoted without risking your place in line.
Which is exactly why the EB-1A category is so incredibly coveted, because it requires a much higher standard of extraordinary ability, essentially the same core criteria as the O-1A, but evaluated with a higher level of scrutiny. The pool of eligible applicants is significantly smaller.
Right. The line is shorter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Therefore, the EB-1A historically avoids these massive multi-decade backlogs. It may occasionally experience short periods of retrogression, but the wait times are historically far, far shorter than the EB2 or EB3 categories.
So the strategy is elegant and aggressive. You use the O-1A to immediately escape the danger of the H-1B lottery. You use the legal stability of the O-1A to rapidly build up your evidentiary profile with more citations and higher salary data.
Yeah.
And then you leverage that fortified profile to apply for the EB-1A green card, completely leapfrogging the 30-year wait line in the EB2 category. Precisely. To quote attorney Chris Ingram directly from the legal research, the O-1A is not a compromise. It removes the lottery risk immediately. And it can help build the case that gets you to EB-1A on the strongest possible foundation.
That is just brilliant.
It is not a secondary option or a backup plan. For high-achieving STEM professionals, it is often the most strategically sound primary pathway available in U.S. immigration law.
So we have covered the massive structural technological shift in medical diagnostics. We have explored the mechanics of multimodal AI and honored the visionary immigrant history behind it. We have dissected the legal absurdity of the H-1B lottery, and we have laid out this incredibly detailed strategic O-1A solution.
We've covered a lot of ground.
Now, we need to turn this directly outward. For the listener out there right now, the systems engineer, the AI researcher, the PhD student who's listening to this and feeling a knot of anxiety about their own future, what is the action plan? What do they actually need to do tonight?
The first step is to strip away the assumptions and do a ruthlessly honest audit of your own professional record.
Okay, an honest audit.
Do not rely on what you think the law requires based on water cooler talk. Sit down with your CV, open a blank document, and physically map your accomplishments against the 8 O-1A criteria we just discussed in detail.
How do people usually mess up this first step?
Yeah.
Because I imagine there is a massive psychological barrier here for people in STEM.
The biggest hurdle is what we discussed earlier, the Nobel Prize myth, which in academia often manifests as profound imposter syndrome.
Oh, absolutely.
Highly educated researchers, particularly those who have spent years inside labs at MIT, Stanford, or CASE, are constantly surrounded by other brilliant people. They have a tendency to normalize their own exceptionalism.
Like they don't even realize they're special anymore.
Exactly. They look at their CV and think, well, of course I have 50 citations and 10 peer review invitations. Everyone in my lab does. I'm nothing special.
But they are.
They fail to realize that compared to the broader labor market of the entire United States, they are operating in the top 1%. You must pull out your CV and stop assuming you don't qualify. Let a legal professional evaluate the data. Do not reject yourself preemptively.
Step 2 from the legal research perfectly echoes this. Don't confuse extraordinary with famous.
Exactly.
Peer recognition is the legal standard. If the people who actually understand your highly niche, incredibly complex AI architecture think you are brilliant and your work is essential, that is the standard. You do not need 1 million followers on social media or a feature in Time magazine.
Step 3 is to start building strategically right now, today. Do not wait until you desperately need the visa to start thinking about the evidence.
Start now, right?
If you receive an invitation to peer review a paper, accept it, even if you are busy. If your lab is presenting at a conference, volunteer to be the one who stands on stage and delivers the presentation.
Get your name out there.
Ensure that your name is correctly attributed on all published work, and that your citations are actively tracked and updated on platforms like Google Scholar. Network with independent luminaries at conferences who might later write your expert letters. You are meticulously gathering the bricks that will build your future petition.
Step 4 is to fully understand the long-term pathway we discussed. Realize that the O-1A is the fast track, the protective greenhouse, leading directly toward an EB-1A petition. You are not just solving a temporary employment problem, you are laying the groundwork for permanent residence and a stable life in the United States.
And step 5 is perhaps the most critical piece of practical advice. Speak to an attorney before the crisis hits. The legal research notes that the worst possible time to start strategizing is when your OPT status is expiring in 30 days, or when you just found out your H-1B lottery ticket wasn't pulled and you have to leave the country in weeks.
That's way too late.
The O-1A requires careful evidence gathering, reaching out for expert letters, and meticulous documentation of citations and salary data. It is a planning tool. Build the ship before the storm arrives.
And it is so important to have the right legal team guiding you through this because, as we've established, possessing the raw evidence is useless if you don't know how to present it to USCIS. I want to highlight a verified 5-star review that our team included in the research from a client named Chandan.
Let's hear it.
Chandan wrote, "The entire team at the law offices of Chris M. Ingram is professional, well-informed, and exceptionally supportive. I highly recommend Chris Ingram's firm." That level of nuanced support and strategic planning is exactly what you need when you are navigating a system this complex, where your family's entire future is on the line.
It truly is. The stakes are simply too high, both for the individuals whose lives are in the balance and for the country that desperately needs their continued innovation to leave this process to chance, or to try and navigate the shifting sands of U.S. immigration law without expert guidance.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. We've talked a lot about the legal mechanics and the individual lives affected, but think about the collective loss to American innovation if we don't fix this structural leak.
It's terrifying.
We have talked about incredible multimodal AI systems that are learning to catch stage 1 cancer or predict a catastrophic cardiac event before it happens. If the specific human beings, the brilliant engineers, the researchers, the modern-day Fei Lees who are currently sitting in our labs writing the code for those systems are forced to leave because of a random lottery, what future cures are we deporting along with them?
So many. We're losing so much potential.
How many life-saving breakthroughs are we putting on a plane and sending away? The technology doesn't build itself. It requires them. And the amazing thing is the legal tools to keep them here already exist. You just have to pick them up. Thank you so much for being with us today. We hope you gained a lot from this discussion. Please leave us a comment if you can. Additionally, you can support our channel by sharing it with your friends and family, helping us build this community together. Also, follow us on Spotify, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, X, and Instagram, where we're growing rapidly thanks to our social media team. We would also like to thank attorney Chris Ingram and his dedicated team once again for researching and preparing this material for our presentation. See you next time on Let's Talk U.S. Immigration. Bye for now.